Now, Rev, I know this is our first time chatting and actually our first time meeting, but I actually have a big favor to ask of you.
What is the favor?
I need you to drive the 6 hours to Montreal. I need you to knock on 9 Eastmore and ask them if you can video the inside of their house.
I don't have a license, but I'll get somebody to drive.
Actually, my uncle lives in Toronto, so maybe he could pick you up. You guys can drive to Dollard because that's where I was born. It was in Montreal.
Forget about Montreal. You're talking about the West Island as well. How is it that we're both from the West Island? Because I grew up in like Baie-D'Urfé, Beaconsfield, like right next to Dollard.
Okay, that means nothing to me because I left when I was 8 years old. So
Sorry, I thought we were having a moment. I thought we were gonna.
I know. Let's just end the interview now. Well, Rev, welcome to America's Dance 30. It is so awesome finally meeting you.
So great finally meeting you. I'm so stoked to be here.
Congratulations on your first #1 with Whitney.
It's so insane to hear you say those words because, like, ever since I was a little girl, I always dreamed of a moment like this and speaking about this and having a #1. So thank you for having me on. Thank you for celebrating with me. And I just can't believe it. It's wild.
It really is incredible. And we're going to talk all about Whitney coming up and find out how the song was born. But since this is your first #1 and since it's the first time chatting, let's get to know Rev a little better with Finky's Firsts.
Let's go.
Now, you were born in Montreal, right?
Yep.
Was French your first language growing up?
Nope. So I grew up in there's only a couple of English speaking pockets in Montreal. I mean, everyone's pretty bilingual, but there's a couple of the West Island is pretty English. I mean, it's bilingual, but it's mostly English. And there's a couple of pockets downtown that are English, but I grew up speaking English first.
Yeah, I grew up speaking English as well. And I think it was because my dad is American. And that's actually why we left Canada, was because he didn't want to learn French. And in Montreal, if you owned a business, you had to know French and English. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so we ended up coming down here to Florida because of that. But do you remember the first French you learned?
I have this core memory of my mom teaching me color, us watching the fireworks and her teaching me how to say all the colors in French. So it was rouge, vert, and just watching the fireworks go, and she'd say, okay, what is this in French? And then so that was my first core memory of speaking the French language. And obviously then going to school and learning it, because you learn it from kindergarten up. So it's great.
Yeah, I have memories of that because I went to a private school where I was learning, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was learning French, Hebrew, and English every single, I know.
That's amazing.
Rev, I don't know what happened to me, but I dumbed down a lot from when I was a kid.
No, don't be so hard on yourself. Kids are like sponges.
I'm definitely one of those sponges that you get done using and then you put it on the shelf and it hardens up. That's me now.
What a visual that is.
Now, of course, Rev isn't your real name, but when you were coming up with an artist name, were there other names that you were first going to go with?
Yeah. I mean, Bria was my artist name way before Rev. And then we wanted to do a tip of the hat to Montreal and do something French. And I remember there's a couple of English speakers from Toronto on my team, and they were like, oh, let's look up some words in the French dictionary and see what's cool. And then somebody suggested DeCarry. And I was like, and if you grew up in Montreal, you know DeCarry is an expressway, and it's there's always traffic on it. And I was like, there's no way that I can be DeCarry. So I was like, okay, I want to evoke something dreamy and, just ethereal. And so Rev was the one thing that stuck because it was just super simple because it's a French word for dream.
And I'm glad you chose that because DeCarry doesn't have the same ring to it.
Can you imagine?
No.
Now playing Whitney by DeCarry.
I mean, when you say it like that, it actually has a ring to it, but
it kind of rhymes, but no.
Yeah, no, Rev is so much better. Now, when you were growing up, was being a singer-songwriter the first thing you wanted to be?
Yep.
Really?
I got really lucky. I grew up in a really musical home. My dad is obsessed with music, so I just grew up there was always a record on anytime that I was home. And there was like an upright piano in our house. And I used to drag my xylophone down and try and match the notes ever since I was a kid, instead of like playing with Tonka trucks and Barbies. Like that was my thing. And so I remember walking into a hotel lobby when I was about 6 in Toronto and seeing this girl playing the Sanka set or the Happy Hour and just like accompanying herself on the piano and being like, oh my God, Mom, like that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Because I just remember the way that she made me feel. And I was like, that's it.
That is so amazing that you started at such a young age, because originally I wanted to be a lawyer because I loved to argue when I was a kid. And still love to argue, but I got out of that a long time ago. I was like, nah, you have to go to school for years. Screw that. I'm getting to radio.
I think you're right where you're meant to be.
Well, thank you, Rev. So are you. Yeah. Now, for anybody that might not know your origin story, you actually got discovered when you were 19, was it? When you were singing the national anthem at a hockey game?
Yep.
Of course, singing the Canadian national anthem, that's from day one living in Canada. But you also sang the U.S. national anthem. Do you remember the first time you attempted that?
It was the day of the audition.
Stop!
Yeah. So I remember being, oh my gosh. So I was working at a bar at the time. And I remember working until close, which is in Montreal, till like 4 a.m. and having to be at the open call by like 10. And my manager at the time picked me up. And he was like, are you sure you know the words to the American anthem? I'm like, I'm not so sure. I mean, I know generally. So I was just there kind of like run down and tired, being like, okay, and then just being like, I hope to heck that I can remember it when I go on the ice at this open call. And it ended up working out. Thank the Lord. It was good.
So what was it like your first time singing it? Forget the lyrics. Think about like keeping the melody and the notes.
It's tough. It's tough, to say the least. It's a beautiful song. Both anthems are gorgeous, but it's a hard song to sing. It's a hard song to do well.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm a little biased, but I think the Canadian national anthem is absolutely beautiful, especially when it's in French.
I love it. I love that we do it half-half, especially in Montreal. I think it's really, really beautiful to combine both languages, and it's been an honor anytime that I've been able to do either of them.
I watched the video from back when you were 19, and you absolutely killed it back then. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. I was such a scared little mouse back then. Oh my gosh, it was very scary.
Well, stop being so hard on yourself. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Finally, in Finky's firsts, in honor of Whitney going number 1, if they were alive today, who would be the first person that you would want to have dinner with? Would it be Michael? Would it be Whitney, Marilyn Monroe, Bob Marley, Lucy, or Jackie O?
Definitely Whitney. She's just, I mean, I love all of them, and that's why they're in the song. But Whitney Houston, like as a singer, I just like watching her every single time in complete shock and awe. And like just her essence is the most beautiful thing. And I would just love to spend 5 minutes even with her, just to hear what she had to say.
Plus, from the front, she was such a strong woman. So I imagine that would be an amazing dinner.
Oh, yeah.
I would honestly love to have dinner with all of them together. That would be an incredible dinner.
Oh my God. It sounds like a sitcom.
Right. Well, let's talk about Whitney. How was this number 1 born?
Oh my gosh. So Whitney is a song that has been in my, because, historically, some people talk about the process, especially when you're with a major, of how it can take a long time for a song to get written and then be released. This one was since 2016. And I wrote this song, 2016. I remember sitting at my 9 to 5 and coming home one day and just thinking, I feel like, because one of the first lines of the song is, I don't want to grow up too old before my time. And I felt that when I was doing my day job, that I was growing old before my time, because I was like just reminiscing about all my idols and how they were just so eternally young and vivacious, and how I just wanted to live a life like that. And that was the inspiration behind Whitney. So I wrote that song, I sent it to my manager, and I had a feeling that it was maybe a little bit more special than what I send him 5 times a week. And he was like, this is really good, But I think that sample, the Whitney Houston, Shaka Khan, Whitney Houston sample that you use in the chorus is going to be impossible to clear. And I said, it might, but let's give it a shot. And so years and years and years and years later, it gets cleared. The miracle happens. I'm still unsigned at the time. And so finally we have this in our back pocket. Universal Music Canada and 31 East take a chance on me. And they're like, okay, let's keep this. And we'll release a couple of records before, and then we'll pick the right time for this one. And the right time was last year. And we finally got to release Whitney after all these years.
So you're telling me that it took 6 years to clear that sample?
I mean, maybe not to clear the sample, but to start the process, to get somebody to back it up, the whole song. And just it's been named 50 different things. It's gone through the hands of through so many hands of so many producers. The whole process took 6 years.
Now, when you were writing it originally, did it have that interpolation in it so it went into that originally as well?
Yeah. So sometimes I remember I was singing in a wedding band at the time. So whenever I would get stuck, in order to just expedite the writing process, I would write verse, pre-chorus, and then sometimes if I couldn't nail the chorus right away, I'd just throw something in there that I already knew that had a similar chord progression. And usually I'd go back and try and beat that with a really powerhouse chorus. But that was one of the songs where I was just I can't beat that. Who can beat that? Ashford and Simpson. It's Shaka Khan and Whitney Houston. And so it just stuck. And while we were trying to clear the sample, I remember my manager being like, maybe let's just try and beat it. It's going to be really hard to clear the sample. Are you sure that we can't write something? And then I wrote things that were crappy and I sent them, and it couldn't be replaced because it just felt right.
Well, I got to be honest, you were kind of on the cusp of all these interpolations because, of course, in the past few years, there have been the style right now is using older songs and changing them, but still keeping the sound of it. If you were working on this 6 years ago, I don't think songs were doing that back then.
It was a bit more rare, I would have to say.
Yeah.
You hear samples all the time, you'd hear interpolations, but they weren't as common as they are now, because it seems like every second song now or third song is interpolated or sampled in some way. One of the scariest things was, oh my God, I really hope somebody doesn't sample this before I get to use it.
Oh, that would have been horrible.
Oh my gosh, I was just a fear in the back of my mind always.
So what is it like as an artist sitting there with a song for 6 years? Is it frustrating, or do you just kind of put it on the back burner and don't even think about it?
It's always in the back of your mind, I think, but I just get so excited and it's so exhilarating creating music, and I'm always creating new music. So there's always something to get excited about. But then, you end up in a conversation with somebody who knows you, and they're like, but that Whitney song, that one's really special. And I'm like, I know, I'm waiting for the day. And the day finally came. And it's just crazy that it's finally out in the world and that it went number one on the dance radio charts. It's so surreal.
Well, I know it was a long process, and as an artist, it was probably frustrating, but everything happens for a reason. And now with this being the style, it really was the perfect time for this song to come out.
Totally. Everything happens in due time and when it's meant to.
Something I love to find out, and you were talking about how many changes it went through, is how many different versions of a song there are from when you start working on it till it's finally put out in the world with all the tweaks. How many different V's were there of Whitney?
Oh my gosh, probably 20. And it had different names. At first it was Ode to Whitney, then it was Dance Like, Sing Like, then it was Icons, then it was Whitney, because we couldn't, part of the thing was that we couldn't call it I'm Every Woman. And so, so it's just cycled through so many versions, so many notes, so many names, and to see it finalized and just that's the thing, that's the hardest part, is just letting it go. No, they say, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's just no piece of art is ever finished. You can always add another paint stroke, but the hardest thing is just releasing it and letting it do its thing. And
Well, I got to be honest, I'm glad everything happened the way it was, because Rêve Whitney is just perfect. Congratulations on your first number one.
Thank you, Brian.
So what is next for Rêve?
We are finishing the album, which is set to come out at the back half of this year, which is crazy to say because I keep saying next year, but I forget that we're in 2023. So it's at the back half of this year. It's my love letter to dance. It's pop influenced by almost every subgenre of dance. So you have your new disco, you have your acid, you have your drum and bass, you have your traditional dance pop. And it's just been a work in progress for the last couple years, and it's almost finished. So that's what's coming down the pipe. Couple more singles between the drop of that album and touring. Just a ton of shows. I'm so excited to get back out on the road and to connect with people and to just celebrate and dance and be free.
Well, congratulations on all that. Can't wait to hear everything that's coming up. Everybody can follow you at Rêve. Is it MTL from Montreal? Is that right?
Yeah, you got it.
And I'm not joking about hopping in a car with my uncle from Toronto, going to Dollard and knocking on the door of 9 Eastmore. You need to do that for me.
I would actually do it next time I go. Don't be surprised. On the gram.
Rêve, it was so awesome meeting you. Thank you so much for your time on America's Dance 30.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. Thank you.